الحمد لله الحمد لله رب العالمين له النعمة وله الفضل وله الثناء الحسن والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. I ask Allah the Exalted to grant us all the sincerest of intentions, the ability to understand and to do good, and the reward in the hereafter. Thereafter, this is the concluding lesson within this particular series. So, inshallah, I'll continue from where we stopped last week before moving on to the conclusion, inshallah. Allah, the Exalted, the one that is not obligated to do anything, the one that is free of need, and the one that we are all in need of. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created many challenges and tests for us in this life. He created that which harms us and that which benefits us. Among those things that harm us, they are many. And those things that benefit us are also many. Allah, by His mercy, He created many ways by which we would be able to protect not only ourselves but those around us in more than one way. Among those ways is to recite certain statements by which you would be protected, dhikr, by which you would be protected. Not only that, you would be able to protect yourself and others. A statement that is recited in general, a beneficial statement, these are called adhkar or dhikr. And sometimes we use the word tahsheen for them. That is statements that you say to protect yourself. Okay? So dhikr, adhkar is the plural of that. Tahsheen is another word. Another word that you might hear being used is ruqya. So a statement that a person recites, usually for somebody else who is ill or afflicted by something, afflicted by sihr, black magic, al-ain, okay, the evil eye, what in Punjabi they call nazar, or they've been affected by some jinn. Then this beneficial statement that you recite is called a ruqya. One recites with the intention, if you're reciting for somebody else, you recite with the intention of getting protection with Allah for yourself, but also for this other person, and for Allah to cure them of whatever might be harming them. And it is evidenced in more than one hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Muslim narrated in his Sahih, and amongst them is what Imam Muslim narrated in his Sahih, that Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam if he was ill. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said yes, because he used to sometimes get ill, sometimes severely. Sometimes he would be so ill that he would faint. He would lose consciousness. And that is also a lesson for us. He, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, would be patient. And Allah would raise his rank even more as a result of that patience. And it's a lesson for us that the Prophet ﷺ, who is the best in the creation, look how he was patient with the different hardships that he faced. The reality is, any one of us, regardless of what hardship you face in this life, it could be worse. If your ear is hurting, think maybe the other one could also be hurting. If both of them are hurting, your teeth could also be hurting. Your stomach could also be hurting. Your head could also be hurting. If you've got pain in one hand, you could have it in the other. So whatever hardships you face, the reality is it could be much worse. And Allah is not obligated to do anything. Allah, who created the pain in one hand, could have created it in the other. And by His mercy, He did not. You be patient with whatever hardships you face for the sake of Allah. And then the reward for you is in the hereafter. The prophets faced more hardships than anyone else. He, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, clearly, explicitly said that prophets face more hardships than others. Then, after them, the other pious people in rank, the awliya, they face also a lot of hardships. Subhanallah. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said he was ill. Jibreel alayhi salam then recited a particular dhikr. He did ruqya for him alayhi salatu wassalam. For he said, Bismillahi arqiq min kulli shay'in yu'zik min sharri kulli nafsin aw ayni hasid Allahu yashfik Bismillahi arqiq. He said, in the name of Allah, I perform ruqya for you from everything that is harming you, from the evil of every individual or envious eye. May Allah heal you. In the name of Allah, I perform ruqya for you. Nazar, what they refer to in Punjabi, or Ain in Arabic. I don't want to go into that for now. It's a whole topic in its own right. We have talked about it in the past, but briefly just to touch on it now, just so you understand what is being referred to. Allah created something called Al-Ain. Okay, Ain literally means eye, or Al-Ain, the eye. Here, in the religious context, it means that when somebody, Muslim or non-Muslim, looks at another person whilst they are having a, if you like, disease or committing a particular sin in their heart. Okay? That sin might be one of arrogance, and it might be one of hasad. Okay? So a type of jealousy. If whilst a person is arrogant or envious, jealous of another person, they've got hasad, and they look at them, they might harm them. Subhanallah. They are the one who is falling short, and they might end up harming you. Just like from another point of view, a thief might break into your house. They are the one who's sinning, but they might end up harming you, physically or in terms of your wealth. That's something that is in this life. Some people, their sins might be a reason for you to be harmed. Okay, this is how it is. Al-Ain is like that. Allah created this situation that some people, when they look at you, whilst they've got this disease in their hearts, they might actually harm you. Not just that, you might harm yourself. A person might look at themselves and say, look how strong I am. And then they have an accident and they become disabled. Look how beautiful my children are. And they do it in an arrogant way, like, look how great I am, looking down at others. As a result of that, they might actually even harm themselves in their health and in their wealth and even in their children. So this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us that if you see something good in your fellow Muslims, of course equally in yourself, then you make a dua for them. Amongst what he taught, as was narrated by Ibn Hibban in his Sahih, is to say, Barakallahu feek. May Allah bless you. Barakah means goodness. Barakallahu feek. May Allah grant you goodness in what you've got. That is, may Allah protect you and preserve you in this issue. And if somebody sees something good in you and they say it, you could say to them, say, Barakallahu feek. Make dua for me, that may Allah bless me in this thing. So that is al-ayn. And in the Quran it is mentioned, O Prophet, had Allah not protected you, the kafirs would have affected you with al-ayn. And to this extent. Subhanallah. So Jibreel alayhi salam, he recited for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam once when he sallallahu alayhi wasallam became ill. Thereafter, if someone is being harmed by other types of harm other than al-ayn, like the harm of a jinn either possessing them or temporarily affecting them in a certain way, or by sihr, that is black magic. And that is when a person who is not adhering to the rules of the religion says certain evil statements, bad statements, calling for the help of the shayateen to make certain other bad things occur. This is sihr. Sometimes in English what they call black magic. Then again, there are things that you can recite for yourself and recite for others so that they would be cured. For example, if someone is possessed by a jinn, one can put their hand, for example, on their head. Of course, if it's a marriageable woman, you don't touch her hair, this is understood. And it's better to be in a state of wudu and to recite for them. And it might be that you recite just Ayatul Kursi 3 times. And these can be recited upon water. Okay, you can recite it upon water whilst also reciting on that person, and you can give that water to that person to drink. And you can add to this, you can recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times, Surah Al-Falaq 3 times, Surah Al-Nas 3 times, or just Al-Falaq 3 times and Surah Al-Nas 3 times. And in the last 3 surahs of the Quran. And then if you want, you can repeatedly recite ayahs 97 to 98 of Surah Al-Mu'minun. وَقُلْ رَبِّي أَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ هَمَزَاتِ الشَّيَاطِينِ وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ رَبِّي أَنْ يَحْضُرُونَ. And you can recite that again and again, which literally means, O my Rabb, I seek refuge in you from the prompting of the shaitans. And O Allah, O my Rabb, I seek refuge in you from their coming near me. Another beneficial dhikr that one can repeatedly recite is Allahu Allahu Rabbi La ushriku bihi shay'a. Okay? This statement, Allah, Allah is my Rabb. I do not take anything as a partner with him. Okay? So this is also a beneficial dhikr. If you are afraid and you're alone, or somebody's gonna harm you, some injustice, you're worried that some injustice might occur to you, then in that situation, you can recite this dhikr, either once, for example, or 3 times, or more than that. Okay? Thereafter, a person should encourage one's family members to regularly recite so as to be protected themselves, and also one can recite for them. Hafiz Ibn Asakir in Tarikh Dimashq narrated that our Master Ali radiyallahu anh said that Jibreel alayhi salam once came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and asked why the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam appeared sad. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, it was apparent on his face that he was sad about something. So Jibreel said to him, why are you sad? What's the matter? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam replied that Hassan and Hussein, they've been affected by Al-Ain. These are the grandsons of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Okay? That even they were affected by Al-Ain. Jibreel then said, recite then for them the following. Allahumma dhas sultanil azim dhal mannil qadim dhal rahmatil kareem waliyal kalimatit tammati والدعوات المستجابات عاف حسنا وحسينا من أنفس الجن وعقل الإنس. And he mentioned certain attributes of Allah and asked Allah to cure Hassan and Hussein from the jinn, their harm, and from the eyes of people, that is the evil eye as it is referred to us. And as I said, when somebody looks, but then in their heart they have something that then leads to this harmful matter, sometimes appealing. It's not going to be always. And in one hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the most common reason for people to die in my ummah will be as a result of al-ain. And sometimes people might have tragic accidents and die. Sometimes they might be well and all of a sudden they get an illness. They have a heart attack, they have a stroke, they develop some cancer. Okay? And the origin of it might be what? Al-ain. Subhanallah. After the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what I recited, Hassan and Hussein got up and they started playing and they were cured. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he then said, عَوِّذُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَوْلَادَكُمْ بِهَذَا التَّعْوِيذِ. Seek protection with Allah, that is the cure and the benefit from Allah, by reciting the aforementioned ta'weez for yourselves, your wives, and children. So recite this for yourselves and others. If therefore a person was reciting it for oneself, just what I've highlighted in red there, that's just the differences. So if you're reciting it for yourself, you could say, Allahumma dha sultan al-azim, dha al-man al-qadim, dha al-rahmat al-kareem, ولي الكلمات التامات والدعوات المستجابات عافني من أنفس الجن وأعين الإنس. عافني means me, and he's protect me from the harms of the jinn and the evil eye. If you're reciting it for somebody else, just like the Prophet said, Afi Hassan, for example, Afi Fulan, right? So you could say the name of the person, Min Anfusil Jinni wa A'yunil Ins, for example. If one's children cannot recite themselves, then in addition to you reciting for them, you can write certain beneficial statements and put them in a pouch or a case and hang it around their necks, for example. Some people refer to this as a hiz and others as a ta'weez, or in Punjabi they might say taweez. Okay? And it is something permissible, contrary to what the likes of the Wahhabis, for example, claim. Or At-Tirmidhi narrated in his Sunan, Al-Hakim in his Mustadrak, and others, that the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever wakes up after a nightmare, a dream that scares them, and as you know, and we've talked about in the past, dreams are of three types. One type, it comes from Shaytan. He has an effect, and as a result of that, you have that dream, and they are nightmares. Right? Nightmares, they are from Shaytan. Shaytan, however that works, Allah knows best, but this is from Shaytan. Allah is the creator. Allah created Shaytan and what Shaytan does. Okay, so they are from Shaytan. And then there's another type of dream, which is just a mix, mash of things. Things that maybe you've been thinking about during the day or previously, and it's just a mix, mash of things. They're like nonsense. It doesn't have a particular meaning, right? And it's not from Shaitan, just one of those things. Just like, for example, we talked about, you sometimes get a whisper, which is like a sound that you hear on the inside. That's from Shaitan. But sometimes you might get a khatir, which is a sudden thought that comes to you. Right? Sudden thought that comes to you. It's not in your control. And it might be a bad thought. You're not accountable for that. You're not sinful for that. It's not in your control. What you are accountable for is what you do with your bad thoughts. That's where the accountability comes. Otherwise, this is a test. There are a lot of evil people around us. Some of them will encourage us to do evil, to lie, to steal, to take drugs, to commit zina, to cheat others, to be unjust to others, and so on else. Okay? So life is a test, but you need to not obey those who tell you to disobey Allah, the Exalted. So, the second type of dream is that. The third type of dream will be a good news that Allah grants to you. Some sort of glad tidings. You might, for example, have a dream in which you see one or more of the prophets. You might see angels. Okay? You might see something else of benefit like that. You might get to go to the Kaaba. Okay? You might get to visit the grave of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Different types of dreams, that are like that. Alright? So, some, as I said, dreams are from Shaitan to bother you, to disturb you. Each time you go back to the rules of the religion. And interpreting dreams is not something you can do by just reading books. Some people think you read some book and they tell you what the dreams mean. And it's not like that. Rather, this is a knowledge that Allah grants to some people. Okay? It's a knowledge that Allah grants to some people. Some of the awliya, not all of the awliya. And even in that, they might be mistaken. Once Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he interpreted a dream. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said some of what he said was right and some not. As for the prophets, they know. Definitely, without mistake. Okay, and the dreams of the Prophet, okay, they are true. They have a separate, special status. But as for the rest of us, they divided into these three categories. Again, these are other topics. I don't want to delve too much into them, but just so you have a bit of an understanding here. So the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us that if you have a dream that scares you, amongst what you can recite, I think you recite before you go to sleep, but amongst what you can recite, if this happens to you, is to recite أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من غضبه وعقابه ومن شر عباده ومن همزات الشياطين وأن يحضرون. And you can recite this zikr in which you are asking Allah to protect you, okay, from, and you ask by Allah to be protected from the harm of the evil of certain individuals amongst the humans and the jinn, and to protect you from the whispers and the prompts, and if you like, the interferences of Shaytan. At-Tirmidhi, he continued to say that the companion Abdullah ibn Amr radiyallahu anhu used to teach the aforementioned dua to his older children. And as for the younger ones who couldn't recite, he used to write it down and hang it around their necks. Okay, this is not something shirk. Some people, they say, this is shirk. Shirk means to associate a partner with Allah. How would writing the name of Allah, seeking the blessings from that, and putting it around my neck be worshipping other than Allah? They say, you believe this creates the benefit. You say, no, that's you thinking ill of me. That's like me being ill, going to a doctor who gives me a medicine that I take, and somebody say, you worship that doctor, or you worship that tablet. No, I worship Allah. And I see the beneficial things in the creation that Allah created. Some of them say, no, this is not the same. What you're doing is like taking a prescription from a doctor and hanging it around your neck, thinking you're going to get cured. Now, some people, when they hear things like that, think, oh, this is just a silly argument. No. For more than one reason. One, you are making a comparison between some scribble of a doctor and the writing of the name of Allah. And this is not an equitable, if you like, a just comparison, without any doubt. No Muslim will doubt about that. There are religious judgments. If I have the name of Allah written down, you don't throw that on the floor, you don't stand on that. That's not the same about the doctor's prescription. Okay? So it's not that this is equal to that. Not that it's just equal to that. The reality is the Quran and the name of Allah, the azkar, even looking at them, there is a blessing. Okay? If you want to go further, this is a glass of water. Okay? Allah created it. If this was Zamzam water, it would still be water. Then its merit changes because Allah created within Zamzam water what He didn't create in other types of water. Allah created in the adhkar, in His name, Allah saying it, looking at it, writing it. Certain blessings that He didn't create in the names of, if you like, John and Smith and Bob and Alan and whatever else. It's not the same. It's not the same. This is obvious to the one who has even a bit of knowledge and a bit of light in their heart. This is very clear to the believers. Not just that, there are some types of medicines, okay, you do put them on your body. They're like plasters that would then absorb into your blood and benefit. Okay, but that's irrelevant what they are saying. Okay, this anyway is something that one of the companions did, and other people among the knowledgeable individuals did not object to his doing of this matter. So it's not just one individual, it's all those who copied and narrated this saying, and those who mentioned it without objecting to it, and so on, through the centuries. This is a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if somebody did not want to do it, no problem. We're not saying it's an obligation. We never said it's an obligation. But if somebody objects to others doing it, claiming it is shirk or haram, then really we don't even need to bring this evidence. The evidence is upon them. They are prohibiting and restricting. Somebody says, what's your evidence you can do it? Well, I didn't put the restriction. You need to give the evidence because you're putting the restriction. We have our evidence. Among them is what I mentioned. Any questions to there about what's been said then about reciting for yourself and others? So to get, well actually I'll tell you what, let's have a 60-second break. Sorry, go ahead.
Also sometimes Bukhari, they do give some reference from Bukhari Sharif. There is a hadith about not
Okay. For you. No. Firstly, the question was, some people, they claim there is a hadith in which it says that you should not wear a ta'weez. Okay? The kuffar of Mecca, the mushrikeen, they used to have a ruqya that they used to do. It's reciting of certain statements that they considered beneficial for protection and harming of evil spirits and things of that type. But they used to say kufr statements within them. So some people might say to you, ruqya is not allowed. Because in one hadith, it mentions about ruqya and certain other things that are worn by people that they are not permissible. And some people then thought that ruqya is not allowed. But they didn't understand that there is a ruqya that the kuffar did, which involved them saying kufr statements. And of course, that's not allowed. As for the ruqya that was done by Jibreel, okay, of course, that's not at the same level as what the Kafirs were doing and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited. This is clear. And we don't just look at one hadith in isolation. This is a Sahih hadith narrated by Imam Muslim, that Jibreel, the head of all of the angels, the best of all of the angels, the most honorable of all of the angels, he came and taught the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam this. And the Prophet ﷺ conveyed it to us, the best of the teachers, okay, the best of the creation, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If there's something kufr or shirk as they claim, then how would it be that Jibreel is teaching this and so on? So that you can't mix between these issues, okay? Thereafter, some of them in their English translations, they use words to indicate that the ta'weez that the Sunnis do is what the Prophet ﷺ prohibited. There are different things that people used to do in the past. We had a lesson on it, so maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago now, you remember, when we were covering Jami al-Khayrat, the whole lesson on this topic from a Shaykh Abdullah rahmatullah alayhi. And in there the Shaykh clarified this matter, that what the Prophet ﷺ prohibited are certain things that the Kafirs were doing. There are different things that they would do involving sihr and things like for example, if they went out of their house, if a bird flew one way, they'd say, therefore, this means I need to do such thing. Right? They'd throw arrows down, and the arrows were in a certain way, they say, therefore, this means that, and so on. Okay? And they go to their idols and they do things there, and so on else. So this is clearly something different. All right? This is clearly something different to what the Muslims do. Is that clear? Okay. Well, I'll give you a 15-second break now. Just close your eyes and stretch a bit. Support. طيب بسم الله. Okay. This is something, any more or less, that I wrote because a WhatsApp message to one or more individual. A warning against madakhil shaytan, openings of shaytan, and harmful over-analyses of the muwaswisin, the people who suffer badly with was-Wās, who harm themselves by opening doors for shaitan. Shaitan looks for openings to get in and harm, to cause trouble between Muslims. Shaitan regularly tries to make a problem out of nothing. Everybody is happy, and he wants to try to make a problem in that. Yes, as we said, Allah created him and his harm. Okay? And back to, what we were saying before, ta'weez and so on else. We believe Allah is the one who creates everything. When we wear it, okay, we believe Allah is the one who created the benefit. So there is no shirk in that. Anyway, Shaitan looks for problems. So when people might be all happy, Shaitan might try to make a problem with them. And expect that he will. We mentioned in last week or the lesson before that, it mentioned in the Quran in more than one ayah, Shaitan is a clear enemy for you, for yourselves. Okay, for you. So take him as an enemy for yourselves. He's a clear enemy for you, so take him as an enemy for yourselves. Actively. Don't let your guard down. Actively take him as your enemy. Shaitan will try to make problems where there are no problems. Okay? This is what he does. And where there are small problems, he tries to make big ones. And from big ones, he tries to make even bigger ones. This is it. No problem, he'll try to make a small one. From a small one, a big one. And a big one to an even bigger one. We need to be careful that we don't give him a helping hand in that. If we do not learn, we'll end up helping him without realizing. If we do not implement, practice the knowledge, the ilm that we have, we'll end up helping him in that. And that's not something good. This one that Allah, the Exalted, said, take him as an enemy. Don't listen to him. Don't obey him. Many people, they open the door to him. Qad yuqal, it's almost like, welcome, come on in. It's like I can't be without you. To that extent. The cure, the solutions is knowledge, understanding that knowledge properly, and implementing it. Truly, knowledge is a light and a source of protection. And ignorance is confusion and loss. This is a fact. There could be a lesson just from that. This is now trying to summarize and conclude. In our religion, we are encouraged to deeply analyze certain matters. Okay? Before, during, and after an event. Okay? This is such as our intention. Not everything. Sometimes there might be some things that are good at certain times. Not all the time. Okay? So sometimes you need to be mindful of this issue. Shaytan will try to play with certain things. And there are some things that you might be allowed to do in a particular context, but not in another context. Right? There are some general rules and there are exceptions. You need to be mindful of that. We are encouraged to deeply analyze. And some things, i.e., though, we're encouraged to do it all the time, regularly, before, during, and after. Regularly look at certain things. Like what? Like our intention. Really look at your intention. Analyze it. Why am I doing this? For what purpose? And I've said before, we are in an era in which the issue of insincerity has really been pushed into us in a strong way from a very young age. As I said, a child might be 1 year old. They've got a dirty nappy on. A situation which we would be embarrassed if we were like that now. Right? There's a bad smell. And that child might be there saying, look at me. Look how nice I look in the clothing that I'm wearing. Why? Because the adults around them push this into them. Nice, and someone else, and I'm going to kiss you and cuddle you extra special because of the clothes you're wearing. So people, you grow up feeling that enjoyment associated with what? How people look at you and perceive you. I want to look a certain way. You're always trying to impress, because when you're a child, which child doesn't enjoy being kissed and cuddled and picked up? Okay? Usually there are sweets and treats that go along with it. Right? So if you grow up like that from a very young age, and that's like, it might be said that's on the light end, but also kind of very serious implications. I mean, the scholars of the past, why did they say that sometimes, not just sometimes, many times, you should just get your kids to wear just plain white? That's generally good anyway. It's sunnah for students of knowledge to wear plain white. But there ain't no labels. Some people, they find it very difficult to wear something except that it's got a label. And to follow others. And look how bad it gets. We don't have it as much in this country. In American services laws. It started maybe, I don't know, could be wrong, but maybe 15, 20 years ago, where certain individuals started wearing their trousers really low, hanging low, in a way that their trousers almost falling off their backside. And once upon a time, that might have been something embarrassing, like your pants are falling down. Like, what are you doing, you clown? You think like that. And then these guys, like, check this out. This guy is being, as they would say, all cool and, and other people, I want to imitate him, I want to be like him. I want to have my pants are falling down. See where it takes you, just wanting to imitate people who don't care about the hereafter. And I'm giving that point as this is actually a humiliation in this life that people are almost like celebrating. Can you imagine the humiliation people will face on the day of judgment as a result of the ways that they behave in this life? How they will be in their grave? And one needs to think about these things. Fear Allah. Fear Allah. SubhanAllah. The grave awaits us all. So, your intention to look at it before, during, and after an event. What was my intention? Think about how humble you are being as well. Your level of humility. Sometimes these things can overlap, and sometimes they can be two very distinct problems. Arrogance and insincerity. SubhanAllah. However, Shaytan, who is our open enemy and who seeks to oppose everything of goodness that we do, pushes people to sometimes overanalyze, things that they should not be overanalyzing, that they should not be overanalyzing. Under the pretense, and under the claim, if you like, pretending to be, under the pretense that this is something good, that he is encouraging them to do that which is beneficial, and or to avoid a certain harm. This over-analysis of certain matters, though it would be something that the Prophet ﷺ did not command us with. But Shaytan then goes further and further, takes that person who doesn't have the knowledge and who is not implementing, and gets them to go down a path and encourages them to open a door to him wider and wider, and then to go down a path that does not comply with what the Prophet ﷺ came with. And one of the examples of that the Prophet ﷺ explicitly warned against is something called ghulu. Ghulu is when a person goes to an extreme in things in the religion. But for example, in praising the Prophet ﷺ. We love the Prophet ﷺ. And if you do this a lot within the bounds of the religion, that's okay, that's good. Saying as-salah upon the Prophet ﷺ a lot, day and night, is something very beneficial, very rewardable. But within the bounds of the religion, you're saying that, okay, you're doing that deed which is within the bounds of the religion. But if you then start to say, the Prophet is great and the best and the greatest of the greatest, and then you start to say, and he is equal to Allah, now you transgressed a bound. You've gone against Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. Akbar. Allah is the greatest. I was once in a masjid in Huddersfield teaching like this. And in that gathering, I said this: Allah is the greatest. And we love Allah more than anything else. Then, after that, the Prophet ﷺ, we love him more than anything else in the creation, more than we love ourselves. So I was explaining this. He said, don't say that. this person who was supposed to be the imam, so-called imam of that masjid. He said, don't say that. Don't say that Allah is the greatest. Don't say that you love Allah the most. Why? Yeah, no, you are believers, you're looking shocked. Yeah, because that kafir, he is the same one who I told you about earlier on that same day, where he claimed that Allah met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, he did his arms like this, and then he said, Allah and the Prophet met each other, hugged each other, and they both became one. At that time, I refuted it in front of the whole mosque. Then in the evening, I was giving a lesson, and then he tried to have a go back at me. But this is the issue he took. But why did it happen? Ghulu. I told another person a few weeks ago, right? He came to my house, I was teaching. I mentioned a few things. He said, "Oh, these are really nice things you mentioned. You know, it's one of the most beneficial sessions I've ever had." So I said, okay, let me tell you something more beneficial. Allah does not resemble the creation, and I started teaching him something. Then he turned around and he said on an issue, no, the Prophet doesn't have a beginning. He's always existing. He doesn't have a limit. And he started going there. I explained to him, and he was blocked. Because they think correct iman is being put into them is with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You go to an extreme in a way that you end up equating him to Allah. They think that's perfection. That's kufr. That's kufr, without any doubt. Doubting about such a person's kufr is kufr. But some people end up there. What takes them there? Look what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says. When talking about me, don't go beyond the bounds of the religion. And do with me what the Christians did with Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. What did they do? They went beyond the bounds until they said he was God on earth. He said, look what he said. He said, say about me, I am Abdullah, and his Rasul. I am the slave of Allah and his messenger. That's an honor. Being the special slave of Allah. Allah refers to you as his slave. You might name your son Abdullah. People might call you Abdullah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was referred to as Abdullah by Allah in the Quran, by the Creator. Okay, Subhanallah asra bi'abdihi. Right? In Surah Isra, in the first verse, that glory be to Allah who took his abd, okay, Allah's abd, on that special journey at night from Masjid al-Haram until Masjid al-Aqsa, as we covered in the past together, so review together. So, ghulu is going to an extreme, but it doesn't usually, people don't go in one step to that. There is something that comes before that. Some of them think this is something good. Okay, the idea of going to some extreme about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They think this is the essence of being a Sunni. No. Essence of being a Sunni is loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, loving Allah and loving his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as is mentioned in the Quran, by obedience to Allah and his messenger. That's how you show your love for Allah and his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By obeying Allah and following the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not to come up something from yourself. Okay. Some people, one person shows the misguidance. He said, as for me, I'm even willing to lie about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam so as to praise him. Look how silly a thing that is. The Prophet, peace be upon him, first of all said it's an enormous sin to lie about him. This is a mutawatir hadith. He said, let that person know their place in hellfire. who would lie about it. It's not permissible to lie about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thereafter, O you who claims to praise the Prophet, is this a praise for him that you fear you need to lie about him to praise him? The liars are in need of lies for them to be praised. As for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the best in the creation, and in that there is no lie. That's what a person should stop at. In the Quran it says, وَكُلًّا فَضَّلْنَا عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. Okay, that Allah exalted the prophets, all of them, above the rest of creation. عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ, yani all of creation. Anyway, be warned against that. Shaitan is able to play with an ignorant person in a way that he cannot play with a knowledgeable person. This is a fact. One of the things that Shaitan does is that he encourages people, as we said, to overanalyze certain matters such that he takes them into a realm, an area that is beyond their knowledge. This is one of the things that he wants. He wants to waste your time. Okay? He wants you to get stressed out. He wants you to think, what about this and what about that, and what about this and what about... Tries to go like this, to think about a lot of cases, to harm you, and sometimes take you to places that are beyond your knowledge. Then, while he has you in this realm of ignorance and confusion, because sometimes so many whispers, this and what if you do that, but what about this and what about that? And you end up in a confused state. He plays with them, harming them and adding to their confusion. But guess what? These people opened the door to him. They opened the door to him. That's where one of the big problems lies. From the very onset, one should not open doors for shaitan to harm oneself. And any such doors that one foolishly and ignorantly opened in the past, then one needs to close them one by one, by reverting back to the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Indeed, one should not leave following the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and invent new methodologies in their place. Some people, you will see them saying precautionary testifications of faith again and again and again. This is not something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam directed us to do. If it was, you would have seen the Prophet do it. You would have seen the awliya do it. But you don't see it. You see them doing it. Because it's not something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us to. Yes, there is such a thing called precautionary testification of faith. About that, there is no doubt. We talked about that in detail. Right? Some people, they saw others and they themselves afflicted with this issue. So what did they then do? They tried to claim there's no such thing as a precautionary testification of faith. This is not correct. This is not correct. Subhanallah. Anyway, one needs to not do also like some people that have dozens of questions. They used to come to the Shaykh. Shaykh, what's the judgment if someone does this? Shaykh, for example, would say, this is kufr, for example. They might then say, but Shaykh, what's the judgment about the one who doubts in the judgment of the one who committed this kufr? Shaykh might then sometimes say this, kufr or not kufr. What about the one who doubts in the one who doubted? You see, where are they going to stop? Sometimes people go like that. And what about this and what about that? Right? Some people would make recordings, some would write it down, and they think this is the way forward. Really, in most of those cases, if you want to close the door to shaitan, it's not that. That's not the way. The way is to say, as we said in the past, the isti'adah, for example. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. To say this statement and stop. Okay? Stop. The Prophet ﷺ said, stop. Don't dwell. Don't have these internal dwelling conversations with yourself and with shaitan, and sometimes thinking and analyzing and taking yourself to somewhere where you shouldn't be. You're not even a mufti. Muftis sometimes have to stop, think, reflect, analyze, what about this, and then what about that, and what are the consequences of this, and what about this, and what about... Muftis need this type of analysis to give judgments. You are not the mufti. So what are you doing? You know what you know, stop. Sometimes people, they'll think of cases and they'll take themselves into a situation and think, well, then have I doubted now? Did I doubt about something I shouldn't be doubting about? Because they've been going into whatever level of analysis that they took themselves to. One should remain sincere, thankful, patient, and humble, and adhere to the advices of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of which are illuminated by the light of knowledge. To understand these things, now you need to go back through the previous 9 lessons in this series and the 20 odd lessons that we did about how to protect your iman, because these series are related. And these are just now snippets. The Prophet ﷺ did not advise or direct us to overanalyze every matter or to have a post-event analysis or analyses of everything that we do. Some people, they would say, La ilaha illallah, okay? And then they say, did I say Allah properly or not? Did my tongue touch my roof of my mouth or not? And how did this come out? How was Muhammad said? Did it come out right or not? Analyze after they've said it. Did you ever hear the Prophet ﷺ say that after you've said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, that after you said it, that you say, okay, now, did I say Ashhadu properly, Alif Sheen? Did it come out properly? Try to repeat it again in your head. Pause, don't say anything, think. Did he say that? Did he tell us to do that? He never told us to do that. Even if you're saying this Shahadatain to embrace Islam, there's a lot at stake, yes. How does Shaitan knock on the door? Did you say the Shahadatain properly or not? There's a lot at stake. You might die upon kufr. You might die upon kufr. That's how he knocks the door. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ say, Shaitan might come to you and say to you, who created the sky? Who created the earth? This is his way of getting in. You understand? This is how, if you like, it might be said, he knocks on the door. His way of trying to get in. And the person answers, Allah. And then answers, Allah. Allah created this and Allah created that. Then he takes you to something kufr. He might end up saying to you, and who created Allah then? This is a kufr question. Allah is eternal. He exists without a beginning. Okay? This universe has a beginning. And for it to exist, it is a must that its creator exists without a beginning. Otherwise, you say, who created him and who created him and who created him? You keep going forever without ever reaching an end. But the fact that the universe exists, it means that the creator exists without a beginning. Might sound a bit complex. It's an issue in Aqidah. We had lessons about it in the past. But anyway, so we don't need to go there. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that this happens to you, okay? Don't, and this is a question from Shaitan. Among what you say is, Amantu billahi wa rasuli. Okay? I believe in Allah and His Rasul. And I stop at that. Stop. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. Ad-Dajjal would come in the future to people. The Prophet ﷺ said, keep away from him. Ask Allah to protect you from his fitna. Isa alayhi salatu wassalam, he is the one, the Prophet of Allah, who will go after him. That's the Prophet of Allah. He is the one, it's his, if you like, task to come and take down the Dajjal. This individual will appear in the future claiming to be God on earth. As for us, don't go there. The Prophet ﷺ said, but some people in the future, they'll hear about Dajjal and they'll say, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'll show him. They'll go there, they'll witness his fitna and become one of his followers. Why go there? Why not do what the Prophet ﷺ said? Keep it simple. Why do you want to go with some other way? Thinking this is the safe way. Shaitan knocks on the door. As I said, he might give you certain whispers. Don't open that door to him. Yeah. Rather, he ﷺ advised people to busy themselves in matters such as acquiring the religious knowledge and making dhikr. If a person truly wants to do that which is good and avoid that which is harmful, let them not invent a way to spend their time analyzing things in a non-beneficial way. Many people, I told you, come to me, Shaitan whispered to me. Maybe 90% of their questions. I've got a question. You can't understand, I need help. I had the Was-Wās. I had the whisper. This is how the question usually starts. I don't want to know your whispers. Like, please, I don't want to know your whispers. No, please, please. I need your help. I need your help. And they think this is how the help will come. And it's not. It's not. Sometimes you have to then be blunt with people. Shake them up. One of the students of Shaykh Abdullah, he used to get Was-Wās about saying the takbir. Did I say it properly or not? Shaykh Abdullah told him, stand for the prayer. He said, Allahu Akbar, okay? And Shaykh shouted at him. He said, it's valid. Correct. Like that. He said one word. He said, it was gone. It shook. That was it. It was ended at that. It's also, subhanAllah, doesn't always work. And sometimes a wali saying a certain statement to a person might go into the heart and give them a certain benefit that if others say it doesn't have that same benefit. Allah protect us. SubhanAllah. So, rather, don't let them follow the way of the whispers of shaitan. If a person truly wants to do that which is good and avoid that which is harmful, let them not invent a way to spend their time analyzing things in a non-beneficial way. Rather, let them spend their time acquiring new knowledge. There's a lot of stuff you don't know. Go spend time learning it. Rather than spending your time in things that are harmful. Memorizing religious texts and reviewing old knowledge that you previously took. There's a lot to do. Among other good deeds. This is what would benefit a person. This is what would enable a person to do that which is good and avoid that which is harmful. And this is why the Prophet, ﷺ, who knows much better than us, informed us that the one who takes the path to acquire religious knowledge, Allah will make the path to paradise easier for them, will facilitate for them the path that leads to paradise. Related to this, what we talked about in the past, be careful of being alone. Sometimes people want to be alone more than they ought to. The Prophet ﷺ, Shaitan attacks the one who's alone more than the one who's among others. And be amongst good people, people who remind you about your hereafter, not who just might entertain you. Sometimes people enjoy being in the company of others who are a proper laugh. But in laughing what? In disobedience to Allah the Exalted. Some people like that might be said, laughing their way to hellfire. That is living their life like this, through these enjoyments. The Prophet ﷺ, I think we said in a few lessons ago, that he mentioned that in some issues the sweetness of this life is what leads to hellfire. And the bitterness of this life is what takes you to paradise. And other hadiths, we mentioned similar statements. You rather have a few less enjoyments and laughs and be obedient to Allah, the Exalted. Be aware. Beware of spending time dwelling on things and talking to yourself, as some people do. Beware of being alone, as I just mentioned. If your problem is all, consider seeking medical advice in addition to what has been mentioned in these lessons. Remember to say that the isti'adha. Okay? One should not talk to or play games with the enemy of Allah, the enemy of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the enemy of Islam, and the enemy of the Muslims. Once you know what is was-Wās, in essence, it's a silly, pathetic little whisper, something there pathetic, just there in the background sometimes. You learn the religious knowledge and keep implementing it until you die. You say the isti'adha again and again. You learn the religious knowledge. You seek to be in the company of good people. Otherwise, you'll find among the things you start to develop are anxiety and depression, more of it. More of it. And that plays into the hands of shaitan. People who are depressed, the shaitan plays with them even more. Why is it that when you lie down, the Prophet said, make some of these azkar? Because when you're tired, you're in that mentally weakened state. Shaitan attacks you more. Same thing when a person's heart is feeling sad and depressed. Sometimes then you need, in addition to this, you might need medical intervention. This is another topic. We had a camp about it in the past. Maybe refer to those lessons. I believe there are video recordings of it. I ask Allah that when I die, when we die, that when the soul comes out of me, I die as a pious Muslim. How do I seek that method, that way? What is that way? Our Prophet ﷺ taught it to us. It's by acquiring the religious knowledge and implementing it with steadfastness. This is the way. Regardless of what comes, this is the way. Always go back to this. Learn and implement. Reflect upon the knowledge that you've taken. Think about your intention. Sometimes a person, they're told they are wrong, and the ego prevents them accepting. They find it really hard. Right? They just persist on trying to think about this issue. The truth is stronger than falsehood. Okay? And the arguments that when sometimes a person might even be refuted on something. And rather than accepting actually what you're saying makes sense, it's a stronger argument, they might go here or there. Just because they find it hard to accept, actually, you're right, I'm wrong. This is strange. I don't know, but I have a lot of people on WhatsApp. Maybe the last decade, it's rare that somebody said to me, I'm wrong, I made a mistake, I was wrong in that issue. It doesn't take away from the person just to say that. Anyway, something that occurred to my mind, Yani, that many times there are things, even religious judgments. Some of you will have seen some, and I'm not saying, make my point clear, so it's not misunderstood. I don't see myself as somebody who's very humble and a good role model. I don't, but Allah, I don't. Some might perceive me that way. It's because unfortunately they didn't meet the real scholars. That's just the era in which we're living in. Okay, the scholars became very few. Those who learned and implemented it in the proper way. But I know that on more than one occasion, over the years, I wrote to people saying, in the past you might have heard me say this. That was wrong. I made a mistake. This was wrong what I said. The correct judgment is such and such. I'm just thinking, almost never did I hear other people doing that. Maybe I'm just one who did those mistakes and they didn't. Even though some others, I know that the case is otherwise. But think about this issue. Don't let your ego be a reason for you to be harmed in this way. I'm not going to let over and just cut up here. So, that method is to follow the Prophet ﷺ. Don't give up, be steadfast, keep going. It's not over till it's over. Be patient because we face difficulties in this life. Recognize that the bad and troublesome thoughts are from the devil. Okay? And sometimes it might be spontaneous whispers. Spontaneous thoughts that just come to you. Khawatir. When a bad thought comes to one, seek refuge with Allah. Moreover, the Prophet ﷺ advised in such a situation that in addition to the isti'adah, there are other azkar that you can make. Do not follow the whispers of the devil. Don't waste your time. Don't ponder over them, dwelling upon them. This wastes your time and sometimes the time of others. Refuse to engage shaitan, to open the door to him, to engage him in conversation. Do not play his game. If you don't play his game, there's no chance of even him trying to beat you. You don't play his game. Don't overthink these things. At the end of the day, the shayateen, they are a creation of Allah, just like me and you. If all of the jinn and human beings got together to harm you, then know that this harm will never reach you if Allah has not eternally willed for it to reach you. If they all got together to harm you, no one will be able to harm you if Allah has not eternally willed for this harm to reach you. No matter how much they try. No matter how much they try. So rely upon Allah. The devil is not a friend of ours, even though he might, when knocking on the door, pretend to be. But we don't take our religion from him. We don't follow his way. We follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In this there is success and safety. And Allah the Exalted knows this. Let's stop here. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi. Allahumma a'inna ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. O Allah, forgive us, guide us, and protect us. O Allah, grant us a correct knowledge and understanding of the rules of the religion. O Allah, accept our attendance in this gathering this evening and give a similar reward to all of our teachers back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. O Allah, make us among your pious obedient slaves. O Allah, make us among those who support the religion day and night. O Allah, make us among those who take shaitan as our enemy and not as our helper or as our friend. Ya Rabb, make us among those who support the religion day and night sincerely for your sake alone, who give priority to their akhirah over the matters of this dunya. O Allah, end our lives successfully. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Just as a reminder, tomorrow there is a lesson in Arabic between 7 and 8 p.m. If you know some Arabic speaking people, encourage them to attend it. It's going to be on a weekly basis, every Saturday, here for brothers and sisters in reviewing the obligatory knowledge in the school of Imam Shafi'i. Likewise, we're starting another new class in addition to these existing classes on Fridays in Urdu and Punjabi, reviewing the obligatory knowledge in the Hanafi school. Okay, every Wednesday, for a few Wednesdays, can be about 6:15. We'll pray our Isha, and then we'll have the lesson straight after. So it will depend on the timings of our Isha. You receive some notifications about that. So again, encourage us. Likewise, here on Fridays, important to listen up. From next Friday, we're going to start reviewing the obligatory knowledge again from the beginning, in a bit more detail in the Hanafi school as well. Okay, so that starts from next Friday. So encourage others to attend, right? In belief and other subjects, we're going to go through the whole text probably over the next year, right? So because we do once a week, it takes that long, to get through. It's like I said, if you wanted to build a house, but you only decide to spend 1 hour a week building it, right? Or if you're decorating a room in your house, if you just do 1 hour a week, it's going to take a long time to decorate that room. Otherwise, you could do it in a weekend, isn't it? So you have to be patient with that. Subhanallah. Most of you chose to do that, unfortunately, to acquire knowledge in 1-2 hours a week. Even though there are opportunities for you to acquire it on a daily basis. There is a full-time religious studies program. You study like 4 or 5 hours a day, review 3-4 hours a day, at least 7-8 hours you're in that. There's nothing that prevents many of you from taking part in that. Some of you I know are busy in the da'wah, okay? But some of you it's not like that. Anyway, barakallah.